How many times have you walked away from a conversation wondering, why did I let that slide? You nodded when you should have said no. You stayed silent when you knew you needed to speak up. Not because you didn't know what was right or wrong, but because you were afraid of being judged, of upsetting others, of being labeled as difficult. A lot of people live like this, thinking they're keeping the peace, when in fact they're abandoning themselves. And worse, they believe that's the way to earn respect. The truth is, you don't need to stand out. You don't need to push yourself to be impressive or prove anything to anyone. What you need is to stop trading your self-respect for fleeting approval. But to do that, you need a new frame of reference, a way of living that makes you strong enough to stand tall without having to raise your voice. That's what Stoicism is. Stoicism doesn't ask you to become someone else. It teaches you to become fully yourself, clear, strong, and steady. In this video, you'll learn 7 essential lessons that will help you stop shrinking yourself, whether it's in relationships, at work, or in a world that often tramples over kindness. This isn't about being tougher. It's about never having to pretend for one more second. Ready? Let's begin. Lesson 1. Your worth isn't measured by applause. Nothing makes us lose ourselves faster than living under the gaze of others. Every time you wait for praise to feel worthy, you hand over the reins of your inner world to someone else. Every time you adjust yourself just to please the crowd, you surrender your spiritual independence, the very foundation of Stoic philosophy. Recognition might seem like a mental boost, but it's really just a golden collar. Shiny, yes, but still a chain. Epictetus once wrote, "It is not a man's actions which disturb him, but his judgments about them." We don't suffer because of criticism. We suffer because we attach our self-worth to it. A harsh comment won't kill you, but the belief that I need others' approval to feel at peace will keep you in bondage. The more you crave validation, the more manipulable you become, because no one is easier to control than someone desperate to be accepted. Look around. Social media has become an invisible battleground of curated perfection where people perform for applause. Personal decisions are no longer guided by intuition or principle, but by guessing, what will people think? And the saddest part is, whether praised or not, we never feel enough, because external standards always shift. In that moment, you're no longer yourself. You're just a reflection of what others expect you to be. No one wants to become a copy. Yet, chasing recognition is the fastest way to become one. Stoics don't fight public opinion with rebellion. They simply don't let it guide them. When your actions come from deep inner conviction, you don't need an audience. Someone who lives by their inner compass feels free even when misunderstood, and stays steady even when isolated. There was a man named Nathan, once a financial consultant at a major firm. He didn't choose the job out of passion, but because his parents were proud to have a son in banking. Every day he dressed sharp, spoke properly, and networked with the right people, the image of success. But inside, he felt hollow. One time he passed on investing in a high-potential project, not because he doubted it, but because the boss doesn't like risk. Months later, the project soared under another team. That's when it hit him. He'd spent so long living by others' instincts, he'd forgotten how to trust his own. Not because he lacked skill, but because he'd never taken ownership of his own judgment. Nathan's suffering didn't come from failure. It came from no longer knowing who he was without the mirror of others' opinions, like a mirror that reflects everyone else but never itself. If you saw yourself in that story, if your heart has ever sunk because someone didn't approve of you, then maybe it's time to rebuild your standards from within. Start by refusing to justify what you know is right. When you turn down something that doesn't align, don't apologize. When you choose a path that looks strange to others, walk it silently, no explanations, no permission needed. Train yourself to make choices based on one question only. Does this align with my values, even if no one else agrees? The best practice is silence after each decision. No defense, no over-explaining, because those who need to understand already do. And those who don't, won't, no matter how much you say. The moment you cut the cord tied to external validation, you're not just free, you're unshakable. And here's the paradox: the less you seek recognition, the more respect you earn. People are naturally drawn to those who are self-possessed. They admire those who don't need to be admired. So ask yourself, if no one knew you did it, would you still do it? If there were no applause, would you still dare to live by your beliefs? You don't need permission to be real. You just need the courage to stop waiting for the nod. And that's the moment you begin to grow. When you no longer need applause to show up, you start to radiate your own energy, a presence that's quiet but impossible to ignore. And that's exactly what we'll explore in the next lesson. Lesson 2. True presence doesn't need attention to be felt. The more desperate you are for attention, the easier you are to control. That's a hard truth to swallow, but Stoics don't care about comfort. They care about the truth. When your self-worth hinges on whether people notice you or applaud you, you've handed the keys to your identity to the world. And here's the irony: the world isn't paying nearly as much attention to you as you think. It's busy with itself. In modern society, we're taught that to be present means to be seen, and to be seen means to impress. People rehearse conversations to win the spotlight, adjust their posture to catch glances, and curate a version of themselves online that barely resembles reality. They don't walk into cafes for coffee, they go to be seen drinking coffee. They don't post to share, but to prove, I exist and I'm worth noticing. But Stoic philosophy has one brutal, piercing principle: anything that needs an audience to exist isn't truly real. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, didn't preach in grand halls. He stood in the public square. He didn't fight for the microphone or climb the stage. He spoke as if reaching one person was enough and a crowd was unnecessary. And that's why his words have endured for millennia, while the popular voices of his era have faded into silence. True presence doesn't demand instant recognition. It's quiet, but it lasts. There's a kind of person who enters a room and brings stillness, not because they force it, but because their energy naturally recalibrates the space. They don't seek eye contact. They hold their own gaze so steadily that others look back. That's presence without performance. And that's why Steve Jobs could stand alone on stage, no music, no gimmicks, and say just one line, one more thing, and the whole world held its breath. Not because he acted important, but because he didn't have to. What we lack isn't the skill to stand out, but the inner stillness to not need to. Have you noticed? People with real gravity rarely speak much. They listen more than they talk, They observe more than they react. And when they do speak, the room quiets, not because they're loud, but because their words are anchored. On the other hand, those who shout the most are often just trying to silence the noise inside their own heads. And you can build that kind of presence, not with flashy masterclass courses, but through small, real practices. When you enter a room, don't scan to see who's looking at you. Check your posture. Notice your breath. When you're in a conversation, don't focus on what impressive thing you'll say next. Look at the person and truly listen. And when you speak, speak like there's nothing more you need to add. No disclaimers, no over-explaining. One clear sentence, one strong idea, and stop. The less you need to be noticed, the more others notice. But it's no longer shallow attention, it's deep respect. You don't explode like fireworks. You become a steady flame that warms anyone who comes near. People may not line up to take your photo, but they'll remember you because you made them feel something real, beyond applause. You might wonder, but won't I seem invisible? Fair question. But ask yourself this: do you want to spend your whole life scrambling not to be forgotten? Or do you want enough inner worth that, even if you're not remembered, your presence was still meaningful? A gust of wind grabs attention, but a stone doesn't need to fly to have weight. What do you want to be? And if something in you just nodded quietly, don't keep that truth to yourself. Share it with a friend who still feels the need to shout just to be seen. Because maybe today you're not just reclaiming your own gravity, you're helping someone else stop running in the race that never ends. Lesson 3. Self-command is the foundation of dignity. Personal worth isn't something to prove, it's something to preserve. And the one who preserves it isn't the smug one, but the disciplined one. The one who dares to reject what's easy in order to hold on to what's right. A Stoic doesn't find their value in the eyes of others, but in their ability to steer themselves, even in the noise, the temptations, or the loneliness. They don't follow their feelings. They watch their emotions the way they'd watch a rainstorm, aware but not swept away. They don't need to shout, "I matter," because their self-control speaks louder than any words ever could. No one is born with dignity. Dignity is built little by little in every choice, every reaction. When you don't let emotions dictate your actions, when you step back from shallow conversations, when you refuse to compromise just to avoid conflict, you're building an inner command system. And that system must be reinforced daily through quiet, invisible acts. Choosing to stay home and read instead of chasing a party you never wanted to attend. Not accepting hollow compliments. Not playing dumb to ease someone else's insecurity. Not sacrificing your principles to maintain a superficial relationship. Not settling for a life that's easy but empty. You can be polite, kind, and gentle, but if you don't lead yourself, life will drag you. Everyone around you is living from some unmet need. They need a listener, a follower, a source of entertainment, or someone to tolerate their chaos. If you don't know who you are and why you're here, you'll become a tool for those needs and call it living for others. But no one thanks you for losing yourself to make room for them. They just get used to your presence. They never notice how tired you've become. Stoicism doesn't ask you to be cold. It asks you to be clear. You have the right to say no, to walk away, to step out of any space where you're no longer respected, not out of pride, but out of responsibility for your own life. When Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself," he wasn't talking about textbook liberty. He meant the kind of freedom you forge from within, freedom from reacting, from attachment, from dependency on approval. The less you're swayed by what's outside, the more power you hold to shape what's inside, and with it, the world around you. The problem is, we've been taught that self-love is selfish. We grew up believing we have to give until there's nothing left to deserve anything in return. We mistake kindness for always saying yes, even when everything inside screams no. But you can't truly love others if you don't respect yourself. You can't lead anyone if you haven't learned to lead yourself. Self-love isn't an emotional indulgence, it's a moral responsibility. Are you living with dignity, or just trying to keep your place in someone else's life by shrinking yourself? Are you staying quiet to keep the peace, even though every silence cracks something inside you? Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling like you just sold off your own worth, just because you didn't dare to speak your truth? You don't have to shout to reclaim your power. You just have to do one thing: refuse anything that makes you lose self-respect. Not because you think you're better, but because you refuse to live beneath your own principles. And the most important part is this: it's something you can practice every single day. Write down 3 recent moments when you did something you didn't want to, just to avoid judgment. Then write 3 things you would do differently if you could go back, and carry those choices into the next moment. You don't need to be perfect, just consistent. Over time, you'll become someone you no longer feel ashamed to face. You weren't born to please. You were born to live with purpose. And the path to self-mastery doesn't require applause, only honesty. If you're ready to live honestly, the next lesson is already waiting. Lesson 4. Your dignity is not a negotiation. You're not hurt because others cross the line. You're hurt because you don't dare to hold that line. No one can trample your self-respect unless you open the door, and you open it every time you stay silent when being dismissed, every time you force a smile at an insult, every time you continue a relationship even though you know you're being taken advantage of. Stoicism doesn't teach you to tense up to prove anything. It asks you to live as a person with principles, even when no one is watching. Compromising your self-respect rarely comes from one big decision. It leaks out in the tiniest things, those so-called harmless jokes, the polite nods, the moments you tell yourself, "Just let it go, it's not worth it." But it is worth it. Because every time you do that, you're teaching people how to treat you. You're writing an unspoken contract with the world. I'll endure it, as long as you don't leave me. That's a subtle form of self-betrayal. Not loud, not bloody, but corrosive from the inside out. You think you're keeping the peace, but in reality, you're quietly killing your dignity, gently, silently, and steadily. A Stoic doesn't stay silent to avoid trouble, nor do they confront others out of anger. They act for something clearer. The truth deserves protection, even if it makes people uncomfortable. So why do so many smart people fall into this trap? Because they confuse kindness with submission, composure with erasure. They choose to hold on to others, even if it means letting go of themselves. But to Stoicism, that's an unacceptable price. A Stoic may accept inconvenience, loneliness, or being misunderstood, but never betray their inner values, just to feel temporarily at peace. Listen to this story, because you might be living like Daniel. He's a creative employee, calm, kind, and always willing to help. But over time, he became the one everyone dumped work on. Once, a colleague used his idea in a presentation to their boss. He knew, but he stayed quiet. He told himself, "It's fine, as long as the result is good." But after that, no one asked for his input anymore. They only came to him when they needed errands done. The cost of being agreeable was becoming invisible. One day, Daniel looked in the mirror and didn't recognize himself anymore. A man with hollow eyes, always on time, always proper, but always overshadowed. And he realized no one was holding him down. He had lowered his own head. Daniel didn't explode. He didn't confront anyone. He simply started with one small action: stop pretending to agree. When someone said something that bothered him, he didn't shrug it off. When a coworker tried to shift work onto him, he said, "I have other priorities." When his always late friend called, he didn't answer. He didn't need to get angry. He just needed to stop. And that quiet action made noise. The ones who used to take advantage of him backed away. The ones who remained began to respect his boundaries, not because he demanded it, but because for the first time he acted like someone who deserved respect. Are you living like Daniel? Are you in relationships where you have to shrink yourself to fit others' comfort zones? Are you afraid that if you speak up, you'll lose peace? Then ask yourself again, is it really peace, or the surrendering of yourself? You don't need to rewrite your whole life. Just sit down and list the places where you feel yourself getting smaller, the jokes that cross the line, the schedules you always bend to fit others, the moments you feel you need permission just to be yourself. Pick one situation, one person, and act. Don't reply to that message. Don't over-explain. Don't apologize for protecting yourself. Dignity doesn't come from shouting. It comes from the quiet boundaries you hold every single day, whether anyone applauds or not. When you live with boundaries, you don't become difficult. You become clear. And clarity is what this world sorely lacks. People who can't accept your limits are not people who should be close to you. And when they walk away, don't mourn it. You just cleared space in your life. If you followed this far, you're not just listening, you want to change. And that's something to be proud of. Comment below, what boundary will you reset today? I'd love to see your commitment. And don't miss what's next, because the deeper we go, the closer we'll get to the heart of what it means to protect your worth in a world that's always trying to chip away at it. Lesson 5. Even silence has a cost when it hides your pain. You don't need to raise your voice to earn respect, but you do need to be silent in a way that makes it clear someone has crossed a line. No one can diminish you unless you bow your head. The trouble is, many people bow not because they feel small, but because they're afraid of losing temporary approval from others. And they call that bowing maturity, tact, keeping the peace. In reality, it's how you quietly hand others the right to rewrite your worth. One joke that isn't funny, one judgmental glance, one passive-aggressive comment at a time. This isn't a story about self-worth being sold off for personal gain. It's something more subtle. It's when you don't sell yourself short, but you also don't protect yourself. You let others use your dignity however they please. It's not that you want to compromise, it's that you stop resisting. You stop standing up. You stop showing up. And just like that, you're not pushed down. You shrink on your own. Stoic philosophy doesn't teach you to dominate or outshine others. It teaches you to be whole, to be solid. No one can truly belittle you if you live by reason. Marcus Aurelius said it best: "A man's worth is no greater than the worth of his ambitions." If your goal is comfort, then people will steer you with just a look or a word. But if your goal is dignity, you'll be willing to trade surface-level peace for inner integrity. Because you understand, any relationship that survives on pretense isn't one worth having. Not reacting doesn't always mean you're taking the high road. Sometimes it's paralysis, disguised in moral language. Let's just be the bigger person. Let's not make a scene. But the more you say, "let's just," the more you stop being yourself. Until one day, you don't even notice you've twisted yourself into silence, just to fit into a mold someone else built for you. It's no longer about being disrespected. It's about you teaching people it's okay to do so. Look at Maya Angelou, poet, activist, truth-teller. She once said, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." She didn't twist her words to keep the peace. She didn't smile it off. In one interview, she asked a guest to leave her house immediately after he told a racist story, not out of rage, but out of clarity. That moment didn't cost her a friend.